Reid really has established himself as a central figure in the development of AI, both as really one of the first check writers for OpenAI back in 2015, all the way through to this week, co-founding an AI startup focused on drug discovery. So he's been in many of the conversations that we hear about, many of the decisions. Reid also published this week a book, which I read over the weekend, Super Agency, and it was an important book for me because I'd say more recently I've felt more like a lab rat, meaning this sort of torrent, right? This overwhelming amount of AI development and new products, new features, new announcements, and that we're in this experiment. We are the species sort of run by big tech to test or to determine if we can thrive with this co-intelligence. And so no one wants to be a lab rat. And I think really Reid's book, and we'll talk about it now, is about how to establish our agency. All of that adds up to me like AI is coming even faster than we thought. That's sort of my takeaway from the last sort of 10 days has been AI is coming faster. Would you agree? And since you're an optimist, an AI optimist, you must think that's a good thing, that AI is going to come faster.
The short answer is yes, it's coming faster. Yes, I think that in generally speaking, coming faster is a good thing. It's part of the difference. I did in the book, Super Agency, I divide categories into doomers, gloomers, zoomers, and boomers. Zoomers hit the acceleration, everything that can happen is good, just go as fast as you can. Bloomers go fast, but drive intelligently, right? It's like, if you try to drive from, San Francisco to LA and you're going 2 miles an hour, it would be impossibly unbearable. You actually want to be driving 70 miles an hour or faster, a little slower. Most of the time, you'll slow down for some congestion, for inclement weather, other kinds of things. And so, and I've actually been anticipating, the kind of technological progress we're in. You always discover some new things. I think the DeepSeek stuff was stuff I was expecting from China, but in 6 to 12 months versus now. And so it wasn't like, oh my God, this couldn't happen. It was like, oh, okay, this happened a little earlier than I was expecting. How do I update my model of the world from that and so forth? Now, the other part of the human adoption that I think is particularly interesting is we talk a lot about it, and I find relatively few people are actually fully engaging with AI as it is today, and kind of what are the things that it can mean to them, their personal lives, their work lives, and other things. And part of what I'm kind of a very strong evangelist in is to engage and to start using it. And so in one sense, it's like, yes, we're going really fast. On the other hand, its integration into people's work and people's lives is like by spotty, forward entrepreneurial individuals, not as much into the fabric of how things are operating. And you say, well, why is that going slowly? And it's because, well, I think what happens is people have a work practice that they're typically working on, like here's what I was doing, here's how I was operating last month or 6 months ago, and that's why I got my job this way, and I feel comfortable and so forth. And I go, well, should I go try this new thing? Well, I hear it's improving really quickly, so I'm going to wait. And it's like, no, don't do that. You want to actually start learning it as soon as possible. So yes, accelerating, but accelerating as expected.
So, and what else is causing the slowness? I would imagine some of it's like corporate slowness. Like you're not authorized, or you're not going to get the good AI, or can't use the data. Can't use company data with AI. I'd imagine media anxiety around job loss, and are some people putting their heads in the sand? Like, what's your sense of what else is contributing to the slowness of adoption?
One, I think it's actually pretty natural, because it's like part of the way that most people tend to operate is learning new things is tiring and engaging and somewhat difficult. And so I kind of want to block that off to a time, and it's like, well, but that's improving, so let me wait until like stabilizes into something. So that's a natural human operant condition. Another thing is that it's not really immediately apparent, to people that go like literally part of the thing that I and a few other folks like Ethan Mullick of the Wharton Business School and others find is like in 2 minutes of conversation sitting with anyone, I can point them to 3 significant uses that they can use today's AI for that would
Mhm.
actually be really helpful to them.
Mhm.
And it's not just, oh, use it for when you have a medical question or something. It's like, stuff that's actually in their life.
Yep.
And they're
Yep.
just not kind of thinking about that way because like the industry and the work cases and so forth haven't really been happening. And then, that's partially also because then you get the lock into working groups and companies are really, generally speaking, pretty clumsy about upgrading the work process. I think when it's all going to really accelerate is when groups of people begin to go, and it could be like micro groups, like this team of coders looks over at that team of coders and sees them moving a lot faster because they're using Copilot and goes, "Oh shit, we should be doing that too." But also like companies competing and so forth, and they go, "Oh wow, okay, we got to be that we can't be behind here." And then that's when the slow adoption moves to a very rapid adoption.
So let's stay with this for just a little bit longer. We're getting tactical, but I like it. So,
Yeah.
what about data privacy? I was with 20 executives yesterday in a workshop, and that was one of their biggest concerns. I don't want to use AI as a thought partner because I don't want to load up the board deck or the business plan or whatever it might be. And that's the kind of work I do because I'm an executive. I'm not writing, social media posts, which maybe AI is great for that. But for me, this is the kind of work I do. How do you respond to that in terms of what's the degree of risk for a typical executive loading up, like something like a business plan or a board deck?
Well, frankly, the risk is very low. If you worried about it, you could start with stuff that the risk is, much smaller, de minimis. Because people tend to imagine as I'm uploading this into ChatGPT or something, and then it's going to be published on the web somewhere,
Right.
right?
Right. Yep.
Or they're going to include it in the ChatGPT knowledge base, and the
Right.
ChatGPT knowledge base is then reflect it in various ways to my competitors, and it was like, with my name on it,
Right.
and like that's the likelihood that any of that happens is just very de minimis. Now, that being said, there are a number of players, not the least of which is Microsoft, that are working on also solutions that have guaranteed zero there,
Right.
and
Right.
there's ways to get that.
Mhm.
Uh, and you, by the way, of course, if it's not, you say, hey, I don't want to be using, public cloud, public market stuff, then you need to be, engaged in some paid service. But the paid services are actually pretty cheap. I would, I would dive into it as strong as possible. So I tend to think most people, when they're kind of thinking the privacy thing, they're kind of giving themselves an excuse to not
Not,
have to
not
deal
to,
with it right now,
yeah, not to
right?
engage. Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and that's unwise.
Sure. Yeah. It also probably doesn't help that I think a lot of people think they're training their replacement,
Yeah.
which is I think sort of a media narrative that engages, right? Hey, your job's going to be taken by the AI you're training.
I feel fairly strongly in most job cases that the job transformation is not going to be a human replaced by an AI, but a human replaced by a human with an AI.
Mhm.
So, sure, you might be training the AI that is the human plus the AI, but if you're doing that, a high likelihood is you're the human plus the AI. If you're like, no, 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 I'm not going to do this, then someone else who walks
Sure.
in goes, okay, I know how to do all of this data analysis and this decisioning much, much better than you because I'm using an AI sales process, marketing process, financial analysis process, legal process, etc., then you're going to be very outmoded. Because I think what's going to happen when the kind of rush starts going is it starts getting to, like, for example, I think by even as early as the end of this year, I think it'll start being the case for software engineers that if you're not using, frankly, probably multiple co-pilots, but at least one, you're probably kind of like saying, I'm a graphic designer and I'm using a 4-year-old version or a 5-year-old version of Photoshop, or something
Right.
like
So,
that is kind of,
right. So, at your own risk at that point, basically, right?
yeah,
You are self-generating that risk, in
yes.
terms of your economic livelihood. All right, let's zoom back out to super agency because as I said, I don't want to be a lab rat. None of us do. Uh, Talk more about, first of all, the motive. What was your motivation in terms of? It felt like a wake up call to us around that we can have more agency both individually and societally. I guess. Just riff on that for a moment or two.
Yeah. Couple things. One, we go into a lot of history of this for analogies so that people understand is that literally every single major technology, the discussion that is had around it is like the discussion we're having around AI. It'll be the destruction of human agency, it'll be destruction of human society, and there's different components of that, but that sort of thing. Second thing was part of it when we go to like data and privacy or misinformation or job kind of loss or transformation, all of those are versions of human agency. And part of the question of human agency is one, when we look at all historical technologies, and we can come to AI being new and distinct in some ways, each of them new and distinct at their times, but this one now
Mhm.
new and distinct in this new way, uh, is to say, okay, the worry is always massive, loss of human agency, and then when you get through the transition, a massive gain of human agency. And matter of fact, even what we call super agency, which is like not only do you get the agency of the superpowers yourself, but when the millions of people around you also get those superpowers, you get also superpowers from them. So super agency is a kind of a collective. We all
Yep.
get superpowers together. So I get a car, I can go drive places, but also people can drive to me. Doctor can
Right.
do house calls, etc.
Yep. Yep.
So, so part of the thing is to say, and then the thing on agency is to say, well, agency to some degree is also a mindset question. Like if you get in an Uber and feel like, oh my God, someone else is behind the wheel and I'm out of control of this vehicle, right?
Yep.
You're gonna have a very bad ride.
Or a
Um,
Waymo. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Waymo. But
Yeah.
if but
Exactly.
if but if you go, no, no, I summoned it. It's going where I want it to go. This is actually part of how like I have done this because it's convenient. I've done this because I've had one too many cocktails. I've done this because, this is the best way to get from A to B, and it's part of my agency, then you have a very different thing. And so having that kind of positive mindset is super important. And frankly, the only way we get to the quality futures is by going towards them. You can't get to the quality futures by eliminating the bad ones, right?
Right.
So,
Sure. Yep.
so
So
that,
it's a little hack you're proposing, a little sort of mindset shift. Just it
yes,
starts with just that shift, right?
yes.
This is where I want to go.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And yes, you could say, but wait a minute, I kind of don't want the big shift. I'd kind of just like to stay here. Isn't that a loss of agency? And it's like, well, there is that loss of agency from the I just want things to stay the same. But by the way, that's part of the reason why we're talking about the Luddites,
Mhm.
in the English Industrial Revolution,
Yep.
who wanted that for not bad immediate reasons, but if they had succeeded they would have literally sabotaged their country, their children's and their grandchildren's prosperities and everything else. So it's like, no, no, this is the economic wave. It's like saying, well, I don't want everyone to have smartphones. I don't want everyone to have the internet. I want everyone to have PCs. It's like, no, no, that's where it's going. Like now steer it because it can be so much better.
Okay, I buy it, but just okay. There's a messy middle there, right?
Yes,
Okay,
100%.
I'll adopt this agency. I'll get the people around me to adopt this same mindset. We'll figure this out. Hopefully, together, we'll steer in these more positive directions. But I don't know, like who's helping us get to these better outcomes? Who's where are the guardrails? And or am I? And frankly, here's the core of maybe my question: am I relying on big tech to be the stewards of this super agency? Because they haven't exactly covered themselves in glory the last 10 years in terms of steering us to the right outcomes when you talk about humanity.
Let me just start with a defense of big tech, which is we all use, here we are right now using
Sure.
big tech in this conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We all use our smartphones with GPS and people use ChatGPT. Like a friend of mine was taking a cab in Morocco and the driver had discovered to use ChatGPT as a translation because it doesn't speak English, but can then engage his business and so forth. And all the taxi drivers who do it, one started doing it, oh my God, this works. Let's do this. And they're all doing it. So like there's just tons of things from translation, email, Wikipedia, like just tons of stuff. And so like the plenty that comes from all of the stuff that's going on with big tech that completely transformed our life is huge and extremely positive.
Mhm.
Next thing gets to a comparison set. You say, okay, so if say this future is going to be built, by the way, it's only going to be built by essentially big tech and scaling tech companies,
Yeah.
but you say, I'd rather have a different institution do it. You're like, well, which institution did you have in mind? Did you have universities in mind? Did you
Yep.
have government in mind? Like,
Right.
no institution's perfect. And so if your thing is, no, no, it should only be built by a perfect institution, you're like, well, what planet are you on?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Like these are the questions. And it doesn't mean that big tech's perfect, doesn't mean there aren't things we should nudge it and challenge it to. I welcome the conversation and all those things that happen. but there tends to be this reflexive kind of like big tech bad, and how do you trust them doing this? And you're like, well, search and all the information that comes from it, you know, email and communication, all of the different messaging apps, da 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 da, da. So now that being said, part of what I think is happening that's really good is this kind of iterative development and deployment, which is part of how your voice is heard, is not because everyone's going to go around and speak to the one-on-one to the billion people using the technology. That's not really what's going to happen, even with AI to assist it. But what happens is, as we collectively engage, and we talk about this in super agency as consent of the governed, um, feedback starts emerging in various clumps. You might have, expert commentators going, well, this is a real challenge. We should navigate this. We should fix this. In the car analogy, it's like, hey, we should have seatbelts, that kind of thing. And so engaging in it, and then just kind of, being part of the network of interaction, the network of feedback, talking in various circumstances about what's really great, what's not really great, and that kind of stuff is part of the iteration. And it's part of one of the things that makes companies extremely, even like democratic, because they're very responsive to their customer base.
Sure, to markets, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's part of the reason why I'm, optimistic on all those variables.
You have faith in human. There's an assumption of faith that we are going to figure this out, right?
Yes.
Implicit in super agency.
Look, part of the reason why I'm so unequivocally very positive on this is the general discourse tends to be gloomer, doomer, etc. AI is bad. What about our data? What about our job loss? Da da da. And you're like, look, embracing this is the cognitive industrial revolution. The countries and industries that embraced the industrial revolution early had the disproportionate, kind of massive increase in prosperity, wealth, influence, power, good careers for the generations to come in their communities and all the rest. And so it's really important to do, right? Now, that being said, the transitions we are terrible at the transitions. I'll use the printing press as an example, which is the printing press. You go, nothing in modern society works with the printing press. You don't have medicine, you don't have science, you don't have education the way you do. None of this stuff works. No middle class, the whole thing. Really, really great on the outcome. Now, when it was created, because we're human beings, we had nearly a century of religious war. So we handle these transitions poorly. Part of the reason to say, hey, let's have a proactive, let's move to an AI curious mindset, let's be steering towards what the positive is as opposed to yelling about all the negatives, go, well, we know we're going to be in this kind of turbulent waters in these transitions. How do we navigate them with the most humanity and grace that we can? And that's what's really important for us to focus on. It doesn't mean stop listening to any concerns. That's part of the bloomer, category versus the zoomer that I'm part of. It's like, no, those dialogues important, but we're going to hit a whole bunch of pain in the transition. No question, no matter what. There will be a bunch of changes in industries, a bunch of changes in jobs. And by the way, customer service jobs will be the one, like among them, that will probably diminish a lot. But AI, by the way, can help people figure out other jobs, figure out how to do the other jobs, help them do the other jobs, train them to do the other job, find the other jobs, all of that kind of stuff. And so part of like helping transition is like, well, let's be making sure that in all of the stuff we're doing, we're making those AIs that help us with our human agency. And that's, essentially with super agency, there's two primary audiences of the book. One is, kind of the designers of the stuff, which is focused on human agency. And the other one is people who are kind of AI uncertain and trying to help them think about how to become AI curious, because that's one of the ways to help them gain and pursue this with some agency.
We are responsible for these transition moments. I mean, who else is? I mean, or if we have inflated expectations of regulation, of government, of big tech for the transitions, I think that's naive. Meaning, I think we're going to have to own more of the transitions, which is where a lot of that pain will be for some. I think we have to get through it. Not easy though, Reid.
Not easy. I'm not, well, if
And I
we,
guess my frustration, Reid, is with big tech is there at times tone deafness to
oh
the
yeah,
transitions. That
okay,
to me,
yes,
you don't need, I'm with you with big tech in terms of the good and the value and our lives are better, but it's the tone deafness that really, frankly, irritates me
but
around
I
these
grant you that
moments.
because I actually think it's one of the things that, like, if anything, I'm trying to communicate to him is like, look, communicate more, like, um, like with emotional intelligence,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
clarity.
So let's talk more about just a little bit more around the risks around the transitions and how you think we should mitigate them. Just where do let's make it real though. So as a leader, where do you see the risks? Leader of a small team, leader of an organization, anywhere from 10 to 10, to 100,000. How do you think a leader should be thinking about risk? Not around sort of data privacy and things like that, but more around
Yeah.
these transitions. What should our mindset be?
I would set the expectations to say, look, I anticipate that all of our jobs are going to transition some as we figure out what these kind of new superpowers are. I mean, it's just like if we add in a new kind of major, kind of SaaS product to how we operate as a company, right? As
Mhm.
we add that in, that will change how we operate and so forth. And it'll affect both some of our individual tasks and also how we work and group together. But what I, want to commit to everyone is that the very first thing I'm looking for is how do we all get amplified? How do we do better work faster? Like all of that in terms of how we're operating. And I'm not looking at this as a look. How do we have half of 25% less of you at this table in a year, right?
Mhm.
But that's
But at the
that's what
same
I'm
time, you
looking for.
can't guarantee that's not going to happen. I mean, I think
Yes,
your talk track here is really important. I'm
yeah,
encouraging the audience to listen because we get asked a lot. How do we talk
yes,
about this to our teams? And so I
yes,
think I think this answer is important. So part one is we're all going to focus on how do we augment ourselves
yes,
with these tools, all of us, right?
yeah,
So, but I can, and the goal is to augment, not replace.
yes, yes.
So what's the last half of this
Well,
conversation? If
but then it's like, look, some jobs may really change, right? And if any one of us, happens to have to have changed a job in a way that's no longer fit for the person, it's no longer fit for the organization in terms of that particular job, a bunch of new jobs will open up and a new sets of opportunities about how to build products and services, how to be competitive, how to do analysis of what's going on, et cetera. We'll try to do that. And if not that, we will, just like anyone else, like if we have a changing set of job responsibilities, we'll try to help, members of our team go find something else that's also really good.
Mhm.
And we can't guarantee any job. And by the way I would do this typically is say, including mine, right, and
Right,
my
sure.
particular skill set will be there. But this is how we as a company flourish. And by the way, all of us in getting AI skills early, like if you're doing this now, all of us become much more employable because like very few people are AI skilled right now. So one of the ways if you're doing it today is to say this actually helps all of us kind of join the modern workforce.
Yeah,
But
it's a tough. Our experience with enterprise, Reid, is this is a tough conversation. Leaders are dodging it
yeah,
right now, quite
yeah,
frankly. I think CFOs and CTOs are buying AI and thinking about efficiencies, quite frankly,
yes,
and CEOs don't want to deal with it. This conversation, not yet. At least at least that's our experience.
yeah,
Unfortunately, I wish they were more direct and more transparent with the workforce. I think it would earn a more trust as relates to AI. And there's a level of trust we have to have here that we can figure this out, and that we do have this agency. Reid, one of the reasons I love the work that you do is that you are not just a pundit and or an investor, but you're a builder, particularly as it relates to AI. So you've put your money where your mouth is. We know that in terms of investing in OpenAI and lots of other companies. But you also co-founded Inflection, my favorite, my first favorite AI, Pi, and now Monas AI. And as a someone who battles cancer, if you will, or manages cancer, I guess I should say. This company is of interest to me. Talk about what drew you to this problem and this approach, I guess.
basically the high line is to say, take the best of science and the best of AI, put them together, accelerate the ability to find cancer cures, and do so as opposed to the typical like idea like I have an idea, and then maybe 10 years later it works or doesn't work in that whole process. Is I have a bunch of ideas and I'm sorting through them and doing kind of superpower within um, kind of within the um, kind of drug discovery process. And it's everything from, okay, what are possible kind of cures or possible chemical compounds, enzymes, etc., antibodies that could be a cure to this. Okay, how do we evaluate them? Okay, how do we start doing some biological testing of them? Okay, how do we get those into, possible drug targets and accelerate the entire thing with AI? So we got Siddhartha Mukherjee, who's already brought a number of different really important cancer drugs to market, and has a complete understanding of, as a doctor and everything else, the human, factors in this, and me helping build the AI stuff and bringing a bunch of, kind of like very smart, deep specialists also from Microsoft into this.
How should we think about what you think about investing in AI? Like anything we can learn from you, and I guess all your recent AI investments, where are you seeing the opportunities? Is it this application layer, which initially everybody said don't invest in the application layer because that you just get eaten by OpenAI and all the foundational models, they just expand their capabilities. It seems like to me the foundational models are pretty busy, building out foundational models still, and ones that are competitive. What's your sense of that sort of investment landscape, I guess, for the rest of us? How should we be thinking about this?
Fundamentally, one of the things that I've kind of decided is that you should, on a startup basis and investing, it'll be rare that the massively scale model is a thing you should be doing as a startup. It just getting to such a cost so quickly that's not in a startup plan. And the kind of the parallel to that is like, for example, if a startup comes to you and says, I have a mobile phone OS idea, or I have a new PC OS idea, you're like, well, that's really hard, right? And very expensive and very unlikely. But that doesn't mean there are tons of massive companies built, on this, whether it's, kind of software in the cloud, software on the PC, software on the phone as an example, or networks of them, LinkedIn, etc. And so like the application thing may be a little bit too narrow in this, but I think the question of how you're establishing a kind of a business ecosystem, what are the kind of problems you're solving? Like, for example, yes, it is generally speaking the case that the larger model tends to be better than the smaller model that's fine-tuned. And actually, I think part of what's going to be happening with the larger models is they are going to be making those fine-tuned smaller models in various ways. And so there's a bunch of things, but that still gives a lot of opportunity for startups to do various things. And that's, kind of, so I would say I'm looking at both. Manus is kind of in some degree both because it's doing some fundamental like bio and kind of drug discovery kind of model stuff, which is unique, and then deploying some off the shelf tech and binding it in various ways in applications which are drugs, right? So it's kind of got the whole the whole sphere. But then there's other things that are like, like Tome and other, and kind of saying, okay, we're applying AI to making it really, really good for certain kinds of like sales professionals, kind of doing things because actually, in fact, it's a massive amplifier and lots of them haven't started using it. And if we get there in a position, we're in, like Tome, we're in a learning loop for doing this and we're delivering that product better. It isn't just show up and say, I got GPT-5, it's going to be a better product. That's not the way the products for human amplification work. And so, anyway, so that's that.
Let's use Tome as example, Reid. It feels like as builders back to super agency or back to agency, the art of building AI apps will be to take over some of that work, but the human stays with agency in the app or in the experience, right? That would seem to be sort of how we need to build AI. If we feel like we're losing agency when we're using AI, I think that's where we'll start to check out. Like, is that what you look for when you look at new apps? Is there enough of the human?
Well, some of them.
In the
Now, like I
experience,
said,
right?
for example, I think that um, I think that kind of like, for example, customer service stuff tends to
Mhm.
be will tend to be much more replacement. Anything
Right.
that you're
Yeah.
trying to like where the work is trying to get a human to act like a robot, right?
Right. Right.
Like I
Right.
think
Yeah.
it's like no, just having the
Just
AI do
do the
that,
AI do it. Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
is better. But I think that uh, that even in the customer service thing, I actually think that what you'll start seeing is like, for example, as an instance, and I don't mean those same number of jobs in this, but like you begin to see customer service experience architects like, oh, we're looking at all these different interactions, and here is ways that we could make the whole engagement a lot better. Like we could actually add in like a follow-up contact, from the AI that says, hey, we really cared about the fact you contacted us yesterday. Is everything working out okay? If we
Mhm.
don't hear back, we presume it is. We're not trying to add a burden to your life, but we appreciate your business.
Mhm.
Well, that could be really good, and that's something you can have now that you have AI. Like it's like, but you start thinking about like that as the like because one of the things I think to think about, how human work is going to be evolving in not a large number of years is if we're all being deployed as professionals with a set of agents helping us, we're all becoming at least mini managers, right? Because as part of mini managers, we're managing those agents. Now, even in customer service, you could say, well, actually, in fact, you have customer service architects who are managing the agents doing it, and they're kind of going, okay, I'd like to review, like, flag to me conversations that were difficult. I'd like to review them to see if there's something we're doing that could be better. I'd like to look at, kind of what are opportunities that we could get a better, NPS score, a better, kind of follow up and engagement with our company on, that kind of stuff. And that kind of thing, I think, both the general thing of, mini managers and even in the customer service, that kind of thing. So I think that's the kind of thing that we'll have, but it's not all like, if it's not amplifying this particular human in this particular job right now, that's not necessarily the right criteria.
We're
Yeah.
managing our AIs, but AI does it end up in our org chart? What's your prediction?
I think the certain answer is yes. And I think that it's like, for example, you don't deploy a AI a person without like a swarm of, like, you could think of as drones, but it's
Right,
like as kind of
right,
like agents with them. And I
with
think
them.
that's what's going to start happening, like soon.
So you get a computer, you get internet access, you get access to Slack and Teams, and you get your agents deployed, kind of first day on the new job. Every email newsletter read about AI is about, the DeepSeek, freak out. Should we care? What's it mean for the rest of us regular mortals, trying to figure out AI and work with it in our jobs? I'd love to get your commentary on what's happened the past week as relates to that.
So there's a lot of various misinformation around the DeepSeek side. Among them, it's just simply not credible that they like what it is the training dollar amount is the last training run, and probably because they have access to some pretty good chips in doing that. But it's also, for example, part of what I think the role of these large models will be to train small models, and I think they had some kind of access. Not, I don't think. I think like kind of weaselly access. I don't think it was
Right,
granted to
right,
like ChatGPT and other things as part of doing it. So I think what's the important thing to realize is that we, in the, kind of competition that the Western industry is going to have with China, that's going to be pretty intense. I think a bunch of tools are going to be offered in open source basis. Like, for example, people who have the mistaken view that, hey, we should be trying to pause all of our AI development until we've really come to a conclusion about what we think about this copyright stuff. For example, they're just saying, oh, we should let the Chinese do all this and not us.
right, right,
Right?
right.
It's like, no, that you just can't play it that way.
All right, time to wrap. Reid, I want to thank you for offering inside of Super Agency. I wish you were still on the board of OpenAI. I'm glad you're on the board of Microsoft. We need people like you in these meetings and in these conversations. So as I said earlier, I'm shocked at how often tech leaders are tone deaf about these moments of transition. So I appreciate that you are in these meetings and you're bringing this humanist, optimistic point of view to the table. It's needed. So thank you.
And I do try to help the OpenAI people too.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for doing that too. I mean, listen, I know they've all got shareholders they're going to have to keep happy at some point. So, it's how it works. But, don't forget about us, the rest of us who are trying to live great, productive and amazing lives at work and at home.